My name is Genevieve Parker. I'm 26 years old, and the night my family tried to erase me began with my mother smiling too hard across my grandparents' dining room. I knew that smile. It was the kind she wore right before she turned affection into humiliation. 10 relatives had been invited for my birthday, but nobody was looking at me like it was my day. They were watching me the way people watch a storm window before the glass breaks. My grandparents' house was warm, crowded, and too quiet in all the wrong places. I could smell old wood, lemon polish, and the faint dust trapped inside picture frames that had been hanging there longer than I'd been alive. A clock somewhere in the hallway kept ticking louder than it should have, like it was counting down to something ugly. I should have left the moment I saw my graduation photo hanging alone on the side wall instead of near the family portraits. I should have left when my mother told me to just relax and be grateful everyone came. I should have left when my father wouldn't meet my eyes. But I stayed, because a small, stupid part of me still hoped this dinner might become what a birthday is supposed to be: a cake, a toast, a normal night. Instead, every glance, every whisper, every forced little smile made me feel like I had not been invited to a party. I had been summoned to a verdict. And standing there in that room, with my own family arranged like a jury, I realized something was about to happen that would change the rest of my life. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The moment dinner plates were pushed aside, the room shifted. Conversations thinned out. Chairs scraped softly against the hardwood. My mother lifted her glass and stood near the fireplace like she was hosting some elegant family tradition instead of setting up my execution. That was when I first noticed my younger sister Sophie sitting straighter than usual, lips pressed together to hide something that looked dangerously close to satisfaction. I didn't understand it yet, but I felt it. She knew this wasn't a toast. She knew this was theater. "Ladies and gentlemen," my mother began, and every nerve in my body pulled tight. She thanked everyone for coming, thanked my grandparents for opening their home, thanked the family for always believing in discipline, accountability, and standards. Not love, not kindness, standards. My stomach dropped. She talked about sacrifice in that polished voice she used in public, the one that made strangers think she was thoughtful instead of cruel. She said children did not become successful by accident. She said parents gave years of money, energy, reputation, and support. She said some children honored that investment, while others made a mockery of it. No one said my name yet, but I could feel it rising in the room like smoke. An aunt folded her hands in her lap and avoided looking at me. One uncle leaned forward with the curiosity people reserve for gossip they're pretending not to enjoy. My father still hadn't spoken. He just sat there with one hand inside his jacket, like he was waiting for his cue. I remember hearing the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. And with each sound, something old inside me began to crack. Not from surprise, but from recognition. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been planned. Every chair, every guest, every sentence. My mother's eyes found mine, and for 1 second I saw it plainly. She was enjoying my fear. "Today," she said, smiling at the room instead of at me, "is not just a birthday. It is also a necessary correction." A strange hush fell over everyone, and the silence that followed felt more intimate than shouting. It was the silence of people realizing they were about to witness something private turn public. The silence of relatives deciding whether to be decent or entertained. My mother reached toward the wall. My breath caught before my mind could keep up. She took down the framed photo of me in my graduation gown, held it up for everyone to see, and suddenly I knew exactly what kind of birthday this was. She ripped the backing loose with one sharp motion, pulled the photo free, looked directly at me, and dropped it into the trash can beside the dining cabinet. "What a waste of money raising someone as useless as you," she said. There it was. No more performance wrapped in polite language, just the blade, finally shown. The room froze. I didn't. I shattered inward. And the second she called me useless, my mind started flashing through old scenes so fast they hit like broken glass. I was 13, sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, crying over math worksheets while my mother told me average girls married average men and lived average lives. I was 17, handing over my first summer paycheck because my father said contributing to the household would build character, and later hearing him brag to relatives about how naturally generous Sophie was, as if I had volunteered. I was 19, getting accepted into the design program I actually wanted, only to be told that dreams were for children and respectable daughters studied business. I was 23, buying my own work clothes while listening to my parents tell the family that I never understood responsibility. Every memory came back in fragments, not because I wanted them, but because humiliation has a way of opening all the doors at once. Then my father stood up, calm, cold, practiced. He pulled an envelope from inside his jacket and threw it across the table at me. It slid through spilled condensation and stopped against my wrist. "Every penny we wasted on you," he said. "Tuition, housing, food, transportation, opportunities you didn't deserve. $200,000. Pay it back, or you are out of this family." Somebody gasped. Somebody else whispered, "Oh my God." I looked down at the paper, but the numbers blurred. It wasn't a bill. It was a public declaration that I had never been their daughter, only an investment they believed had underperformed. My face burned, but not from shame alone. Rage was rising now, hot and precise. Around me, I heard the room splitting into types of people. The smug ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones too cowardly to say anything. My mother crossed her arms like she had finally won. My father waited for me to beg, and in that exact moment I realized something they did not. They had chosen the one kind of cruelty I would never forgive. Humiliation with witnesses. I could have screamed. I could have cried. I could have defended every lie in that envelope. Instead, I picked it up, folded it once, and set it back on the table. Then I looked at my mother, at the trash can holding my face, and at the relatives pretending not to enjoy the spectacle. "You wanted a performance," I said quietly. "Fine. Don't forget this night." "I won't." Then I turned and walked out while 10 pairs of eyes followed me to the door. I made it halfway down the front steps before my legs threatened to give out, so I stopped beneath the porch light, breathing hard, trying not to let the night swallow me whole. The cold air should have cleared my head, but all I could hear was my mother's voice and the sick little rustle of that photo hitting the trash. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't leave yet. I have proof." David. I turned and saw him through the front window near the hallway arch, one of the few guests who hadn't looked entertained. David wasn't family. He was my cousin Elena's longtime friend, someone I had met at previous holidays, quiet enough to go unnoticed and observant enough to miss nothing. I stepped around to the side gate, and 2 minutes later he came out holding his phone like it was evidence in a trial. "I recorded most of it," he said. "And that envelope stunt? Your dad showed it to your uncle in the kitchen before dinner." He was bragging. I stared at him, still raw, still shaking. "Why would you help me?" I asked. He gave me a look that was almost offended. "Because what they did in there was disgusting, and because that wasn't the first time I've heard your father talk about money that wasn't his." That sentence landed differently. I wiped my face and asked him what he meant. David hesitated, then said my grandparents' trust paperwork had come up months ago when he helped my uncle scan old documents for an insurance issue. He remembered seeing separate education funds for each grandchild. Mine had been larger than Sophie's because of a scholarship match from an aunt who had passed away. I never received that money, never even saw records of it. The cold stopped feeling like weather and started feeling like clarity. I opened the family group chat right there under the porch light. My hands were steady now. I typed, "Thank you all for attending my public disowning. Since tonight was apparently about accountability, I think the truth deserves the same audience. Nobody contact me until you're ready to talk about where my education fund went, why my wages were taken for years, and why my father just handed me a fake bill in my grandparents' house. I'll be bringing receipts next time." I hit send before fear could catch up. Inside, phones began lighting up one after another. Through the window, I saw heads lower, brows furrow, mouths open. My mother grabbed her phone first. My father looked toward the door. Sophie's face changed, and for the first time that night, she didn't look pleased. She looked nervous. David exhaled slowly beside me. "Now," he said, "you need something stronger than anger. You need structure." That was when the plan stopped being revenge in the abstract and became strategy. Not screaming, not pleading, not a messy family argument they could twist against me. Evidence, sequence, timing. I looked at the glowing windows of the house where they had tried to bury me in public, and I made myself one promise. If they wanted a lesson in accountability, I would give them one no one in that family would ever forget. Over the next 5 days, David and I built the counterstrike like a legal case disguised as a family reckoning. I didn't go home. I stayed with a coworker the first night, then rented a short-term studio using money from my emergency account. The same account my parents never knew existed because I had learned years ago to survive quietly. David came by the next morning with copies of the partial trust scans he had mentioned. My cousin Elena, furious after reading my message in the group chat, quietly sent me screenshots of past conversations where my mother had lied about paying extra for my housing. During years, I had actually covered rent myself. Then, unexpectedly, Sophie called me. I nearly didn't answer. Her voice was small when I did. She told me she had known our mother planned to embarrass me, but she had not known about the fake bill. She cried when she admitted something worse. She had overheard our father say that if the family turned against me hard enough, I would stop asking questions about the fund. That was the moment I stopped seeing the birthday dinner as cruelty alone. It had also been a preemptive strike. They wanted me discredited before I uncovered what they had done. So David and I organized everything into 7 short voice memos. Clean, sharp, impossible to interrupt without looking guilty. Each one focused on one offense. Memo 1, wage theft disguised as family contribution. Memo 2, forced career control and financial coercion. Memo 3, the education fund that vanished. Memo 4, the fake narrative they spread to relatives about me being irresponsible. Memo 5, loans taken from extended family under false pretenses. Memo 6, the luxury villa trip my parents claimed was for family health recovery, though it had been paid from pooled family money. Memo 7, the birthday ambush itself, including David's recording and time-stamped messages showing it had been planned in advance. I recorded all 7 in my own voice, calm, clear. No sobbing, no screaming, no melodrama. Just facts, dates, names, amounts, screenshots, and the kind of tone that says I no longer need your permission to tell the truth. We built a folder with backups, labeled everything neatly, and shared a timed access link with 3 people I trusted: David, Elena, and eventually Sophie, after she sent me bank screenshots from a tablet our parents once used for shared travel bookings. Those screenshots showed transfers from an account name I recognized from the trust documents. I remember staring at those numbers until my hands went numb. My father hadn't just manipulated me emotionally, he had touched money attached to my future. My grandparents' money, My late aunt's contribution. Something sacred in that family that changed the stakes. This was no longer about revenge for humiliation alone. This was about exposure with consequences. We needed the right moment, and my grandmother gave it to me without knowing. She sent a message to the family group asking everyone to come Sunday afternoon because recent tensions needed to be addressed before gossip fractured the family further. My mother agreed almost immediately. Of course she did. She thought she could regain control in a more favorable room. She thought Sunday would be about managing me, softening the story, reframing the birthday as tough love. She didn't know I had turned her ambush into an archive. Sunday was not going to be another argument. It was going to be a release of evidence. By Saturday night, the 7 voice memos were finalized. I listened to them once, back to back, alone in the studio. My own voice sounded unfamiliar, steadier, older, done with asking to be believed. When the last memo ended, I looked at my reflection in the dark window and realized something simple. The girl they had trained to explain herself was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly where to cut and how deep to go. Sunday at my grandparents' house felt nothing like my birthday. The same old wood scent lingered in the hall, the same clock ticked from the corridor, the same portraits watched from the walls. But this time, the room did not belong to my parents. It belonged to the truth waiting in my phone. My grandparents sat together near the bay window, visibly strained. My mother arrived in cream silk and controlled indignation, the uniform of a woman expecting to play victim gracefully. My father entered with that brittle calm men wear when they think authority is still enough. Sophie came last, pale and silent, and took a seat far from them. David stood near the bookshelf with his hands folded. Not family, not intimidated. My grandmother asked everyone to remain civil. My mother immediately began speaking about misunderstandings, about my emotional instability, about how some children rewrite events when they cannot face their own failures. I let her talk. My father added that the birthday incident had been regrettable but necessary. Necessary. That word almost made me laugh. Then he made his mistake. He said, in front of everyone, if Genevieve has allegations, she should make them plainly rather than poisoning the family with drama. I stood up and said, gladly. I connected my phone to the portable speaker my grandfather used for holiday music and placed it on the coffee table. You gave me an audience once, I said. Now I'm returning the favor. Memo 1 played first. My voice filled the room, describing years of pressured paycheck transfers, accompanied by screenshots of messages my father had sent demanding money under threats of guilt and punishment. An uncle frowned. An aunt began scrolling through her own phone, likely checking old transfers. Memo 2 detailed the coerced career decisions, the way tuition support had always been contingent on obedience, the way every act of help had been weaponized later as debt. My mother interrupted twice, but my grandfather told her to sit down. Memo 3 changed the air completely. I laid out the trust paperwork, the scholarship match, the account references, and the transfer trail Sophie had provided. At the phrase, funds moved without my knowledge, my grandmother's hand went to her mouth. My grandfather asked to see the documents immediately. My father's face lost color for the first time. Memo 4 exposed the lies told to relatives, that I had wasted opportunities, failed classes I had never failed, rejected jobs that had never existed. Elena backed it up with screenshots. I watched certain relatives stop looking at me and start looking at my parents with dawning disgust. Memo 5 named the private loan several relatives had given my parents over the years after being told it was for Genevieve's instability, Genevieve's housing crisis, or Genevieve's poor financial choices. One by one, those relatives realized they had been manipulated using my name as collateral for sympathy. My Aunt Clara stood up so abruptly her chair scraped hard across the floor. "You borrowed from me because of her?" she asked my mother. "You said she was 1 month from eviction." My mother opened her mouth, but no answer came out. Memo 6 documented the villa trip. Dates, payment sources, captions they had posted privately, and the account overlap with family pooled funds. At that point, the room was no longer murmuring. It was erupting. Two uncles started arguing with my father. An aunt demanded bank access records. Sophie, trembling, finally spoke and admitted she had heard our father say the money question had to be buried before the girl gets ideas. My mother turned toward her in horror, as if betrayal from a daughter only mattered when it happened to her. Then I played Memo 7. The birthday recording filled the room. My mother calling me useless, my father presenting the bill, the rustle of shocked relatives, the smugness so clear it made even the bystanders sound ashamed. When it ended, silence slammed down harder than noise. My grandfather rose slowly to his feet. I had never seen him look old until that second. "Did you use family money held for my granddaughter?" he asked my father, "and then try to destroy her in this house to stop her from asking about it?" My father tried the usual tricks: context, misunderstanding, emotional exaggeration, parental sacrifice. None of them worked. My grandmother cut him off with a voice so sharp the room went still again. "Enough." Then the consequences started landing all at once. Aunt Clara said she wanted every dollar repaid within 30 days. Another relative demanded written records of past family support requests. My grandfather announced that all existing inheritance arrangements would be frozen pending legal review. My mother actually reached for the edge of the sofa like she might fall. My father tried to step toward me, perhaps to intimidate me one last time, but David moved first, and my grandfather told him not to come any closer. It was over. Not emotionally, structurally, financially, publicly. The authority my parents had used like a weapon for decades was collapsing in real time. They had invited witnesses once. This time, the witnesses were taking notes. I thought humiliating them in front of the family would be enough. I was wrong. What happened next was worse for them than any scene I could have staged. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was collapse. The kind that happens when the lies stop working all at once. My grandfather didn't raise his voice, but somehow that made his words hit harder. He said my parents were no longer welcome to manage, access, advise on, or influence a single dollar connected to the family estate. Every inheritance arrangement that included them was revoked on the spot. Every future distribution would go directly to the grandchildren through legal protection they could not touch. Then he looked my father in the eye and said the words I think he feared more than disgrace. "My attorney will be contacting you." My mother went pale. My father actually tried to laugh, like he could still bluff his way out with charm and indignation, but no one joined him. Not one person. My Aunt Clara demanded repayment of the money she had loaned them within 30 days. Two uncles said they wanted full documentation of every family emergency my parents had ever collected money for. My grandmother, still shaking, said that if even half of what I presented was confirmed, my parents would never again step into her home. Sophie stood up then, finally, fully, publicly, and said she was done protecting them. She admitted she had heard enough over the years to know this wasn't one terrible mistake. It was a pattern. Years of manipulation, years of theft wrapped in the language of sacrifice, years of making me the family scapegoat so no one would look too closely at them. My mother started crying and reached for Sophie's hand, but Sophie stepped back like my mother had become a stranger. That was the moment something in the room truly ended. Not the argument, the illusion, the idea that they were still the center of the family. They weren't. They were the stain everyone was now trying to understand. My father turned to me and said I had destroyed the family. I looked him dead in the face and said, "No, I just stopped you from doing it quietly." That silence afterward was brutal. No one defended him. No one asked me to be gentler. No one told me to calm down and remember they were my parents. Because now everyone had heard the recording. Everyone had seen the transfers. Everyone had watched them try to bury me before I could expose them. My grandfather made one final call right there in front of everyone. He put the family lawyer on speaker, briefly explained that trust funds may have been misused, and requested an immediate formal review of all related accounts, transfers, and signatures. My father lunged forward and demanded that the call be ended, but my uncle blocked him. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in him. Not anger, not pride, not control. Fear. Real fear. The kind men feel when consequences stop being theoretical. My mother kept saying, "Please, this doesn't need to become public," and that almost made me laugh. Public? She was worried about public now? She had invited 10 relatives to my birthday to throw me away like garbage, and now she wanted dignity? No. Dignity was a privilege she had burned herself. My grandmother stood and pointed toward the door. "Leave," she said. "Both of you. Right now." My mother froze. My father stared at her, then at the room, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to rescue them from the shame. But no one moved. Not Clara, not the uncles, not Sophie, not even the relatives who had smirked at my birthday dinner. One by one, they looked away from my parents the same way people look away from something rotten they wish they had noticed sooner. My father tried one last tactic before leaving. He looked at me and said, low enough to sound personal, "You'll regret this when you have no family left." I stepped closer and answered just as quietly, "I'd rather have no family than keep pretending you were one." He had no comeback for that. He just stood there, reduced to a man everyone could finally see clearly. They walked out without another word. No dramatic apology, no final defense, no dignity. Just two people who had spent years ruling through guilt and fear, now leaving under the weight of their own exposure. But it didn't end at the door. Within 2 weeks, the legal review confirmed unauthorized movement of money tied to my educational trust. More records surfaced. Loan requests, transfers, fabricated explanations. My grandparents cut them off completely. No inheritance, no financial support, no access to family properties, no invitations to holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, or even funerals unless specifically approved by the lawyer handling the estate dispute. Aunt Clara filed a civil claim for repayment. One uncle did the same. Another relative forwarded evidence of tax discrepancies connected to the same accounts. What my parents had treated like private family manipulation was now becoming a legal disaster with paperwork attached. Their social circle collapsed next. The relatives they had lied to stopped taking their calls. Friends who had admired their polished image started hearing the real story. Sophie moved out and cut contact. My mother sent me 3 long apology emails I never answered. My father sent one message calling me vindictive. My lawyer saved it. My grandparents changed their wills. Every portion that might once have passed through my parents was rerouted away from them permanently. My name and Sophie's name remained. Theirs did not. That, more than anything, destroyed them. Not just losing money, losing legacy, losing access, losing the power to stand in the middle of the family and decide who was loved and who was punished. That power was gone forever. Months later, I heard my parents had sold jewelry, then a car, then quietly listed their house after legal fees, and repayment demands started closing in. The same people who once handed me a fake $200,000 bill were now drowning under real numbers they could no longer manipulate. And the cruelest part, for them, was that nobody rushed in to save them. That was what they had done to me emotionally for years, abandoned me in plain sight and called it discipline. Now they were the ones standing outside the circle, knocking on doors that would not open. When my mother finally asked through an attorney if I would meet with them for family reconciliation, I declined. I sent back one sentence: "You ended that relationship the night you tried to make my humiliation a celebration." That was the truth. And truth, once spoken clearly enough, does not go back into the dark. I left my grandparents' house that evening with Sophie beside me and David a few steps behind, and I realized I was no longer walking away in shame. I was walking out with witnesses, records, protection, and a future my parents would never touch again. They had tried to disown me in public. Instead, they disinherited themselves, exposed their own fraud, lost their daughter, lost their reputation, lost their place in the family, and opened the door to legal ruin. As for me, I didn't just survive that birthday. I turned it into the day everything they built on lies finally burned down. Today, I didn't just take back my birthday. I took back my name, my future, and every piece of power they stole from me, and they paid for it with everything. At Revenge Argon, our team is committed to creating meaningful and engaging stories that leave a lasting impression on viewers. Every story on this channel is purely fictional, created to deliver valuable lessons and educational messages in an entertaining way. The villain in this story wasn't just cruel, they were deeply manipulative, using humiliation and control to break someone they should have protected. Their actions show how dangerous toxic family power can become when it goes unchecked. If you were in Genevieve's place, how would you deal with someone like that? Would you walk away quietly, or make sure they faced the consequences of what they had done?